because you know when I battled, that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest battle in rap.
Nas has always carried himself like the calm general, smooth, calculated, and above the noise. But in hip-hop, dominance is never given, it's taken. And behind that cool demeanor, Nas has fought battles that were about more than just music. They were about power, respect, and who really ruled the streets of New York. From betrayal inside his own circle to rivals who tried to strip him of his crown, Nas's journey is filled with feuds that tested his throne. Today, we're diving into the 10 artists Nas hated the most and the hidden wars that defined his fight for dominance. At number 10 on the list is Cormega.
Thing about it all. Nas made a record dissing me in 2001.
When you talk about Queensbridge, you can't leave out Cormega. To many, he was supposed to rise alongside Nas as one of the borough's sharpest storytellers. They grew up in the same trenches, ran with some of the same circles, and for a moment, it seemed like their brotherhood was unshakable. In fact, when Nas was first starting to take over the rap game in the early 90s, Cormega was right there, considered one of the top underground MCs of the era. His name rang out in the streets, and when Nas assembled The Firm, his dream rap supergroup,
The Firm, most legendary group, one of the legendary.
Cormega was supposed to be part of that legacy, but here's where the story twists. Instead of being elevated, Cormega was suddenly cut from The Firm. In his place, Nas brought in Nature. And for Cormega, that wasn't just a business decision, that was betrayal. Imagine being promised a seat at the table, only to have it ripped away just as the feast began. Fans at the time speculated that the move wasn't just about talent, but about control. Nas wanted soldiers who would follow his vision.
I needed my.
Cormega, outspoken and fiercely independent, didn't fit that mold. That's when the bond snapped. What had once been brotherhood turned into one of the most bitter rap feuds in Queensbridge history. Nas used Stillmatic as his stage to publicly air grievances. On Destroy and Rebuild, he spit, "Mega, I hope you blow, so I'm saying your name."
Hope you blow, so I'm saying your name. Mega.
It wasn't just a diss, it was a dismissal. A way of saying you were replaceable, you were expendable. Cormega didn't stay silent. He hit back hard with records like F Knas and Real Niggas, tracks that dripped with venom and resentment. In those songs, he painted Nas not as a king of Queensbridge, but as a fraud, someone who abandoned his people the moment he reached the top. Fans picked sides, some claiming Nas had every right to move how he wanted, others swearing that Cormega was the only one keeping it real. The tension wasn't just in the music, it spilled into interviews, magazines, and the streets of Queens itself. For years, this feud festered. Every time Nas dropped a line that seemed aimed at Mega, the fire reignited. Every time Cormega gave an interview, fans listened closely to see if he'd throw another jab. And even though the two eventually reconciled, even performing together on stage years later, the scar remained. To this day, when hip-hop historians talk about Nas's most complicated relationships, Cormega's name always comes up. And that's why he lands at number 10 on the list of artists Nas hated the most. Because this wasn't just about rap. It wasn't just about business. It was about betrayal. It was about loyalty shattered in public for the world to see. And once Nas put those feelings on wax, the whole world knew that the bridge between him and Cormega had been burned, maybe not forever, but enough to make history. Number 9 on the list is Nor. When you think of Queen's rap energy, Nor immediately comes to mind. Loud, unpredictable, raw, he embodied a street energy that made Capone and Noriega one of the most authentic duos of the late 90s. On paper, he and Nas should have been natural allies, but instead, their relationship soured, leaving Nor on the list of artists Nas hated the most. The tension came down to respect. Nas saw himself as a poet, a perfectionist who treated rap like fine art. Nor, on the other hand, was chaotic, unpolished, and thrived off pure energy. To Nas, that style came off less as lyricism and more as hype. Industry whispers suggested that Nas often downplayed Nor's skills in private, and fans picked up on his dismissive tone in interviews. The cracks widened when Queensbridge beefs exploded in the early 2000s. Nas was firing shots at everyone. Jay-Z, Prodigy, Cormega, and Nor got caught in the crossfire. On Destroy and Rebuild, Nas rapped, "Niggas tried to play me with the firm. I left Nature, Mega, Noriega." Just like that, Nor was lumped in with rappers Nas deemed expendable. It wasn't just a diss, it was erasure. For someone who prided himself on surviving the streets and carving out his own lane, that dismissal cut deep. Nor hit back in interviews. He even said on an interview that he will f Nas up.
Well, Nas never had a fight in his life, nah.
Years later, Nor would even admit that their tension came from Nas's superiority complex, a sense that Nas looked down on everyone else. Fans debated endlessly. Was Nas right to dismiss Noor as less lyrical? Or was he overlooking the fact that Noor was dominating clubs and radio with records like Super Thug? In some ways, their beef wasn't just about personal feelings, it symbolized a larger clash in hip-hop. Pure lyricism versus raw energy. Though they eventually reconciled, with Noor later interviewing Nas on Drink Champs, the scars of that era remain. For Nas, Noor was never on his level. And for Noor, Nas's dismissive tone was the ultimate insult. That's why Noor lands at number 9. This wasn't about betrayal or all-out war. It was about one thing rappers hate most: being disrespected. Prodigy, Mobb Deep, comes in at number 8. Queensbridge has always been a war zone in hip-hop. Every rapper from the projects carried not only their own name, but the weight of representing the entire neighborhood. And in the middle of that storm were two giants, Nas and Prodigy of Mobb Deep. On the surface, they were brothers in arms, two voices shaping the gritty narrative of New York. But underneath, tension simmered, and it eventually turned into one of Nas's most bitter feuds. The beef started with politics inside Queensbridge itself. Prodigy admitted in his autobiography, My Infamous Life, that some of Nas's circle didn't believe he deserved to rep Queensbridge.
Feeling like I shouldn't be in the position I'm in, or I shouldn't be able to rep Queens.
He wasn't born there, he was from Hempstead, Long Island, and to some, that made him an outsider. For Nas, who saw himself as the chosen poet of the projects, Prodigy's claim to Queensbridge fame felt like a challenge. That quiet competition soon became open tension. Things escalated in the early 2000s when Nas dropped Stillmatic. On the track Destroy and Rebuild, he called out multiple Queens figures, including Prodigy, with the line, "I'm a bridge, nigga. You ain't the only one." It was subtle, but fans immediately connected the dots. Nas was reminding Prodigy and everyone else that Queensbridge had only one king. Prodigy didn't stay silent. Linking up with Cormega, he fired back on Thun and Kiko, spitting subliminals that cut at Nas's credibility and painted him as someone who turned his back on his own people. The tension wasn't as explosive as Nas versus Jay-Z, but it was raw, personal, and deeply rooted in the politics of who really owned Queensbridge. At one point, Prodigy even took shots off the mic. In interviews, he suggested that Nas was falling off, claiming nobody listens to Nas anymore. For an artist who prided himself on being timeless, that line stung. Nas, in turn, seemed to brush off Prodigy publicly but couldn't resist slipping jabs into his music. It was a Cold War rarely head-on, but always present. Fans were divided. Some saw Prodigy as the street soldier who had every right to rep QB, the voice of the struggle who kept it real when Nas went more commercial. Others believed Nas was justified in defending his crown. On hip-hop forums and radio debates, fans argued over which one truly embodied Queensbridge, and the rivalry became part of QB lore. Despite the bitterness, fate had its own plans. By 2011, the two finally reconciled, joining forces on Mobb Deep's Dog Shit alongside Havoc. When Prodigy passed away in 2017, Nas honored him, proving that whatever animosity once existed had been buried by time and respect. But make no mistake, during their peak, this was no small disagreement. It was a battle over legacy, territory, and identity. For Nas, Prodigy was a rival who never fully backed down, and that's why he sits at number 8 on the list of artists Nas hated the most. Sliding into number 7 is 50 Cent. At the peak of 50 Cent's infamy, he was carpet-bombing insults against practically every rapper in the game, and Nas wasn't exempt. The beef between Nas and 50 Cent was sparked on 50's track Piggy Bank, where he took a direct shot at Nas for getting a tattoo of his then-wife Kellis on his arm. 50 famously rapped, "Kellis said her milkshake brings all the boys to the yard divided by," then Nas went and tattooed the bitch on his arm. That line set off a chain of events. With his famous Jay-Z beef out of the way, Nas didn't just let it slide, he offered up a series of rebuttals in his own music, aiming for 50 Cent. However, despite Nas's responses, the rivalry never really caught fire. Unlike Nas's intense back and forths with Jay-Z, the Nas and 50 Cent feud never reached the same level of animosity or public spectacle. So, where's the beef now? Well, fast forward to Summer Jam 2014, and Nas and 50 Cent squashed their rivalry on stage in front of a live audience, with 50 acknowledging that the whole beef had been much ado about nothing. Nas later revealed that, looking back, he regretted getting the tattoo in the first place. At number 6 is Cameron. Nas and Cam'ron's beef began in a somewhat unexpected way. It all started when Nas was on the radio discussing some of the albums he didn't quite like. During the conversation, Nas casually mentioned Cam'ron, and it was clear that he wasn't a fan of his music. The remark caught Cam'ron off guard. The situation escalated when Cam'ron, feeling hurt and disrespected, retaliated with his own diss track, Wet Wipes. The track was aimed directly at Nas, whom he felt had crossed the line by disrespecting him publicly. But there was more to it than just music. This beef wasn't solely about lyrics. Cam'ron had always looked up to Nas, and to hear Nas dismiss his work left him feeling betrayed. Nas's comments felt like a slap in the face to Cam'ron, and he had to respond, not just as a rapper, but as someone who felt he had been unfairly targeted. In interviews, Cam'ron admitted that he was hurt by Nas's diss, especially since they had mutual respect for one another in the past. However, despite this, the two never truly patched things up, and the rivalry simmered quietly behind the scenes. Cam'ron later expressed that he felt Nas had betrayed him, and while the feud never reached a full public explosion, the tension was clear. Number 5 is a name we are familiar with, Tupac. The feud between Nas and Tupac was as much about pride and miscommunication as it was about lyrics. The tension began when Tupac interpreted Nas's song The Message as a direct attack on him. The line, "Fake thugs, no love, you get the slug," hit a nerve, and Tupac fired back in against all odds, accusing Nas of copying his style and questioning his street credibility. To Tupac, Nas wasn't just a rival, he was someone who was trying to live in a fantasy world, borrowing from Tupac's own blueprint while questioning his authenticity. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Behind the scenes, the beef wasn't as deep as fans believed. In fact, Nas and Tupac actually met face-to-face in Central Park, where they talked it out and realized much of the drama was based on misunderstandings. According to Nas, they even planned to reconnect and discuss the possibility of a music collaboration. Imagine the impact that could have had on hip-hop's future, a collaboration between these two legends. Sadly, Tupac's untimely death put an end to that possibility, leaving fans to wonder what could have been. Nas later revealed in interviews that they had actually squashed their beef before Tupac's death, and both artists were ready to move forward.
So what happened was, the brother was like, "Nah, I'm from New York, Nas, we like this, don't never let nothing come between us."
This wasn't just a feud over lyrics, it was a missed opportunity for two of the genre's greatest voices to unite. The clash between Nas and Tupac shows how easily words can create division in the world of rap, but also how reconciliation was always on the table, even in the most competitive of times. It's a reminder that sometimes what we see as rivalry may just be a misunderstanding, and the true potential of collaboration is often left unrealized. Number 4 on the list is the notorious B.I.G. While Nas and Biggie never had a public beef, there was an underlying competition between them. In the mid-90s, both were vying for the title of King of New York. Nas had already cemented himself as a lyrical genius, but Biggie's rise was undeniable. The tension started to escalate, especially when their album covers began to resemble each other, further fueling the competitive atmosphere between the two.
It's over the album cover, right?
The album cover, Biggie, because I had a picture of Young Me on the cover, and then Notorious B.I.G., rest in peace, had a picture of a baby that was going to be him.
The tension reached a peak when Nas dropped the line, "Lex with TV sets the minimum in the message," a reference to the Lexus cars Biggie loved to flaunt in his music. Biggie responded with his song Kick in the Door, with a line that many fans believed was aimed at Nas. "Your reign on top was short like leprechauns." However, the feud was never fully realized as a public battle. It was more about competition than animosity. Both respected each other's craft, but their competing status in the East Coast rap scene made them rivals. Their careers were tragically cut short. Biggie's life ended in 1997, and Nas's rivalry with him was left unresolved. But what could have been? What could have happened if these two legends had worked together? The story of their rivalry is a lost opportunity, a what if, that fans will always wonder about. Jim Jones takes the number 3 spot. Nas and Jim Jones's rivalry isn't one of those classic beefs that fans always talk about, but when it flared up again, it certainly caught attention. The tension between Nas and Jim Jones actually started way back when fans began comparing the two artists. While Nas, as a lyrical giant and hip-hop legend, stayed in his lane, Jim Jones took those comparisons seriously. Over time, Jones became more vocal about it, eventually claiming he had more impact on hip-hop than Nas. And just when you think it couldn't get any more outrageous, things kicked up a notch when Jim was asked about his comparison to Nas on the Joe and Jada podcast. He didn't back down, he doubled down. insisting that his influence and relevance surpassed that of Nas.
The statistics of what I've done, you heard to what other people was done. You heard them. You want to go to the Billboard entries, pull up Nas' Billboard entries, then pull up my Billboard entries.
This statement sent shockwaves through the rap community. Fans and critics alike were left asking, how can Jim Jones claim to be more influential than Nas? The debate spiraled online, and things got even more heated when sports commentator Shannon Sharpe on the Nightcap podcast didn't hold back. He asked, "What were you smoking when you said you're better than Nas?" Sharpe defended Nas's legacy, pointing out how Nas had shaped hip-hop and influenced generations, while Jim Jones was still struggling to get respect from the mainstream. Then, just when you thought the beef might die down, a 2005 video of Nas resurfaced. In this clip, Nas completely dismissed Jones, mocking the idea of even responding to him. He said, "Imagine putting pen to paper to write about him," and the crowd erupted in laughter.
Yo, honestly, I can't, if it was like Jim Jones, imagine putting a pen to paper to write about him.
Nas didn't stop there. He went on to say that Jim Jones never made his peers nervous the way legends like Biggie, Tupac, Cannabis, and Eminem did.
The niggas that used to have a nigga a little nervous was like B.I.G., Pac, right? Even Cannabis, like Eminem, the niggas used to have you like.
But Jim Jones didn't take it lying down. He later posted on Instagram, explaining that his comparison to Nas was a calculated marketing move designed to boost his streaming numbers. He added, "If you're 40 and up arguing with me about Nas, y'all already lost," proudly claiming that going viral and stirring the pot had helped push his streams up. Number 2 is Kanye West. Nas's beef with Kanye didn't come from personal jabs or shady rumors. It was all about creative differences. Nas and Kanye initially seemed like a perfect match. Kanye produced tracks for Nas on Life is Good 2012 and later on Nasir 2018. But the cracks in their relationship started to show as the sessions went on. Kanye, known for pushing the boundaries of music, wanted Nas to embrace a more mainstream experimental sound. But Nas wasn't having it. He's known for his deeply conscious, lyrical, and classic style, something Kanye couldn't quite understand. During the recording of Nasir, Kanye expressed frustration over Nas's reluctance to go along with his vision, even criticizing him for rapping offbeat on the track Cop Shot the Kid and shooting the video without telling him.
Cop shot the kid, Nas rapping all goddamn offbeat on it, don't even want to shoot a video. They shoot the video, don't even tell me.
This wasn't just about music, it was a clash of philosophies. Kanye's more commercial approach didn't sit well with Nas, who was holding tight to the foundations of hip-hop. And then there's Kanye's controversies, his public support for Donald Trump, his frequent outbursts, and his unpredictable behavior, all of which only deepened the divide between him and Nas. While there's no public diss track or major confrontation, the tension was palpable. And this feud showed how two artistic minds, each incredible in their own right, can struggle to coexist when their visions don't align. At the top of the list is Jay-Z. The beef between Nas and Jay-Z? It's iconic. It's one of those rap feuds that define entire eras. The rivalry started back in 1996 when Nas failed to show up for a recording session for Jay-Z's track, Can I Live? Irv Gotti said the same thing in an interview.
We was waiting for Nas.
That's what started the beef.
To do the second verse.
And show up. That's what started it. Because you was in their beef a lot.
This incident set the tone for their rivalry, and when Jay-Z released his debut Reasonable Doubt, Nas's voice was sampled without his permission, which added more fuel to the fire.
I'm sure, nigga, I was there. I was in the studio, nigga.
Because Dead Presidents, he sampled Nas' voice, right?
Yes.
Okay, continue.
I didn't even place you in that.
But it wasn't until 2001 that things went nuclear. Jay-Z's takeover ignited the infamous battle with Nas. In this track, Jay-Z took direct shots at Nas, questioning his place in the rap game and attacking his credibility. That was the tipping point. Nas didn't take this lying down, he responded with the now legendary Ether, a track that completely dismantled Jay-Z's image, mocking his street credibility and accusing him of selling out. The tension between these two rappers went far beyond just music. Radio stations even held polls to decide who won the battle. Nas's Ether came out on top. Jay-Z eventually had to apologize publicly after his mother intervened, urging him to reconcile. But here's the thing, while the beef simmered down, it cemented their rivalry as one of the most significant in hip-hop history. This wasn't just about lyrics. It was about two icons battling for the title of New York's true king. So, what do you think? Did these beefs define Nas's legacy? Or did they just show how complex the world of hip-hop really is? From 50 Cent to Jay-Z, Nas has tangled with some of the biggest names in the game. And in each case, it wasn't just about music. It was about respect, loyalty, and the future of hip-hop. But what if these rivalries weren't the end? What could have been? Drop your thoughts below. Let's get the conversation going. And who knows, maybe we'll uncover even more hidden beefs in hip-hop's untold history.